All right, it's Monday, and the LSU loss is still BS, but you got to pick up the pieces and move on. Dissecting what Carolina did wrong on Saturday. Locked On Gamecocks starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome in. I am your host, Chris Marler, and I appreciate all of you joining us for another episode of Locked On Gamecocks. It is Monday, September 16th. We've got a good episode for you today, and we appreciate you guys joining us and making us your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, we are a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcasts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm going to have to turn off the TV here in the background because I can see Daryl and Andy from the office in the reflection, which is fine. It's been a fun, very long Monday, but nonetheless, we are back at it again, talking about what happened on Saturday and then also picking up pieces moving forward a little bit. Before we do, speaking of picking up the pieces, help pick up the pieces of your day. If you're tired, if you're lagging, if you're any of the above or all the above, grab a 5-Hour Energy today. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at 5-Hour Energy. Go to 5hourenergy.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. All right, let's get into it. Saturday, I told you we were going to have our instant reaction video. We did. A lot was said. A lot was said by me. A lot more was said by y'all. 21,000 people so far watched that video of me melting down after that game. And about 1,000 comments were made as well. I appreciate you guys listening, voicing your opinions, telling me where I was right, wrong, somewhere in between. And we'll move on from today. So this is Monday. I said I was going to record yesterday. I didn't. But we are back at it, and we're looking at the LSU game. And here's the thing: it's been 48 hours. So I'm trying to give more logical and measured takeaways than I did on Saturday because I recorded that from those 10 minutes after the game. Right off the bat, I'm always going to be honest with you guys about how I feel or what I view or what I see. It may not always be right, but I will 1,000% always be honest with what I think my takeaway is. And my takeaway still is that I do think South Carolina was screwed out of that game. And that doesn't help necessarily. And there's some things that we're going to get into today that Carolina could have done a much better job of. But when I look at that, I think the thing I keep coming back to, it's like the 2 pick sixes taken off the board. It's the 13 penalties for 123 yards, by far the most in the Beamer era, the most they've had at Carolina in the last 8+ years. I don't think that helps move you forward as a team or a fan base. I do think there's a lot of positives that came from that game. And we're going to get into some of them today. But I think there's a lot of positives you take away from that game. And the team, I can promise you, has already not forgotten, but they have moved on from it because they know what's in front of them. And what's in front of them this week is not what's in front of them the rest of the year, but what's in front of them this week is an Akron Zips team that is terrible. It is a get-right game by all means. You're almost a 4-score favorite against them. I think it's like the line that came out, it's like around 26 or 28 points. We'll get to that as the week goes on. But, looking at that game, I still look at it, and it's hard for me not to say Carolina deserved to lose that game. You can't blame it on the refs. And I've seen a lot of people say you can't blame stuff on the refs because it's like a loser's mentality or it's whatever. That's fine. Like, it's easy to say that, I think, if you're an LSU fan, to say, well, you're just being a sore loser because you lost and blah, blah. It's like, sure. You know why LSU fans are so vocal about it? Because they know. What should have gone on Saturday. They should have left Columbia with a 1-2 record, and they didn't. And the one that sticks out to me more than anything still, man, is the offensive pass interference, that this phantom OPI call that had nothing to do with the play. Also on a play that you should have easily called defensive pass interference, and you called multiple times in the same place on the field already against South Carolina. That's almost exactly where the Eamon Warry PI was called. But the things that South Carolina could have done better, there are things they could have done better. First and foremost, I thought that kick was in at the end. Gotta have a better job, I think, of being able to like put yourself in a better situation at the end of that game. Would have been nice to pick up a few more yards to get closer so you're not attempting such a long field goal. That's on Dowell Loggins, right? So trying to be self-reflective and honest about like the things they could have done better, I would start working backwards from there. There's other stuff that I think LaNorris Sellers has to be better about. I think he has to be better about. There's stuff that he does on third downs, and I think it has to be a mental block at this point where it's like it's something happens to where his awareness on third downs especially is really bad. It's really, really bad. And I'm not saying that to pick on him. I thought he played his best game of the season so far. I thought he did a lot of things really, really well. And I thought he looked good throwing the football at times. I thought he really did. But there are certain things that he does on third down specifically. You cannot put your team in that situation. You just can't. I thought the interception that he threw in the red zone, I thought that was inexcusable, to be honest. There are times when I think that and he's going to learn this because here's the thing. That you can look at this from a standpoint of like, it's great when it happens, but at some point it's going to cost you a game. These mistakes that we saw against Old Dominion, these mistakes that we saw at times against Kentucky, they did rear their ugly head again at times against LSU. And ultimately, it may not be the main reason or the sole reason you lost, but it's a reason that you lost. So, again, this is a honesty hour, like self-reflection. How do you get better? And I think LaNorris Sellers would be the first to tell you that he has to be better. Now, I think the plan with Sellers too, like I think that Robbie Ashford coming in, it felt very much like, how do I put this? I'm not even solely convinced that it's Ashford that was so bad at throwing the football that went out the window. It felt like as soon as Sellers was out, the game plan was out. For most of the third quarter, the offense was anemic and a shell of itself. And a lot of that is because you have the starting quarterback that's out. Sure, of course. But you can't tell me that a former starting SEC quarterback, I think he had his best career game against LSU. He had like 330 yards and like 4 touchdowns against them a couple of years ago at Auburn. You can't tell me that he can't be relied on at least. And if that's the case, then how did he have such rave reviews in the spring? I thought the offensive identity and the offensive game plan that happened when LaNorris went out was really, really bad. I also thought there was other things that they could have done better at the end of the first half. I still don't understand why you don't try to at least kick a field goal at the end of the first half. It would have been like, 55 plus? But like, dude, you got to do something. I mean, you got to do something, or you got to get yourself in a situation where you are close enough to go attempt a field goal. That part was really weird. I did not enjoy that part. There's a couple of them of things like that I thought just were odd coaching choices, but it did feel like there could have been times where it felt like Dowell Loggins really, for a quarter, like snuck away or like crept into a hole of this is going to come out in the wrong way, but I don't care. But it like crept into this whole like insecurity. I'll give you the example that keeps coming to mind. It's like the coach from The Waterboy. Like he just all of a sudden it's like all this self-doubt crept in. It's like, dude, you've been calling a great game so far. Like you've been calling a great game so far. I mean, and you've answered. You went up 17-0. You had some help from the defense, obviously, and special teams, but you went up 17-0. The first drive was incredible. The answer when it became, was it 17-10? And you break off a 75-yard run to LaNorris, hats off LaNorris, hats off the offensive line for blocking the scheme, and then hats off to Dowell Loggins for calling it. But in the third quarter, you just disappeared. And I think that I'm going to say this as bluntly as possible without it trying to sound like aggressively negative. But if your offense disappears that much with how average LaNorris Sellers has been at times, that's a play calling issue. That's a play calling issue. Let's be very clear. LaNorris had a phenomenal game on Saturday. he has not exactly lit the world on fire in your first 2 games. So how does the offense just disappear like that against that defense? I mean, you had almost like 300 yards of offense in the first half. So I thought that was disappointing a lot. And then I think there's other stuff getting into the fourth quarter. It's just, I talked about this on the shows leading up to it. When you have a chance to put your foot on someone's throat, you do it and you don't let up. And that is something that this South Carolina team is going to have to figure out. And to be honest, they're going to have to learn that from the top down. Shane Beamer is one of the greatest dudes, I think, in this business. Thought he handled himself tremendously well after the loss. Thought he handled himself tremendously well after the loss. Way better than the coach that won. Brian Kelly sending in something to review the officiating after the game is unbelievable. That, like, we talk about it on here as like a self-reflective, like on this episode being like self-reflective and honest and objective with what you did wrong. That is effing unbelievable. I thought Beamer handled himself really well. I don't know as of right now if he or this team specifically has a killer mentality of where you have to go out, win yourself a ball game, and you go do it. You go find any way to do it. I say that though in the same breath, and it's like, man, they kept answering and kept answering and kept answering. So still a very, very tough loss. And I know that LSU fans are really excited about it. LSU fans, good for you. Get excited about something because you escaped with Columbia and you got gifted a win. I have a feeling you're not going to be gifted a lot of those the rest of the year. And there's that. Now, moving into the next part of the show, I do want to talk about, too, some of the positives that are going to come from this because there are a ton. One of them being the national perception of where you are right now and how that affects you in the postseason. Because if you can get to the postseason, I think Carolina is looking at a much better result and selection into a bowl potentially than they were going into this. And I'll get into that in the next segment as well. We'll also go over some PFF grades and talk about some of the players that did well, some players that didn't do so well. But again, listen, it's Monday. We got to move on. It was a tough loss. And I there's just still so much to be proud of, though. There's so much to be proud of. And we'll continue talking about it before we move on, like I said, but I appreciate all of you guys for tuning in, especially to this episode as well as the last episode right afterwards. Now, before we move on to the next part of the show, do you want to give another shout out to our friends at 5 Hour Energy. Now, 5 Hour Energy, I talked to you guys about them a lot. I've had 2 today again. Don't judge. I love them. If you're trying to tackle a to-do list, if you're trying to go work out, if you're just trying to get in the zone, 5 Hour Energy shots give you the feeling of alertness and energy you need to get ready. Whether you, like I said, tackling a to-do list, 5 Hour Energy fixes tired fast. Whether you have a long list to do for work or a list of DIY projects to tackle at home, take a 5 Hour Energy shot so you can check everything off your list. If you're like me, you always have a large list of projects at home. When you get your supplies to the project, don't forget the most important and essential supply, which is a 5 Hour Energy shot. Before you work out, yeah, absolutely. Give yourself a little boost. Give yourself a little energy boost, especially a little kick in the backside and get it going before you head on down to, I don't know, if it's a Brick House Gym. I think it's finally moved off of off of UG Street. I'm out here at Planet Fitness over here in Lexington. But either way, make sure you go grab a 5 Hour Energy today. If you go to 5hourenergy.com, that is the number 5hourenergy.com. Get some 5 Hour Energy products today. You can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB. Receive a 20% off discount off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th, so you have about 14 more days to order it. It's only valid on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders, but go to 5hourenergy.com today. All right, when we come back, we will continue talking about this game and also some of the grades, who did well, who underperformed, all that kind of stuff from Saturday's game against LSU as well. Locked On Gamecocks continues right after this. All right, back at it. We are talking about the things that they could have gone better against LSU and talking about also some of the PFF grades and things, and then some positives that came out of it as well. Listen, I think one of the main things we have not talked a lot about this year because it hasn't really come up as much is the offensive line. And the continuity has been better than it was a year ago. But you're talking about a game where you give up 5 sacks and a ton of pressure. And you gave up sacks in situations where you have QB hits and pressures, like I said, and also situations where a quarterback, where we saw multiple times, fumble after getting hit. This is a problem that has plagued Sellers since he started the first couple games. That's also a little bit on him, but looking at the numbers here, 5 sacks allowed, 9 tackles for loss allowed. You knew what you were going up against with their offensive line. You only got 2 sacks, and then you had 6 tackles for loss. I honestly think that's a good day. They hadn't given up a sack all year, right? I think that's a good day. But there were still some things. God, even Morey was incredible all day. Debo Williams, he was fine. He missed a couple tackles, which was very, very un-Debo Williams-like. But back again to the offensive line, it felt like at the very least, LSU had a plan with Blake Baker and that defense and Harold Perkins, who had been kind of a non-factor at times this year. They had a very, very good plan for what they wanted to do to provide pressure on LaNorris Sellers and on Robbie Ashford. That is something I thought that they could have gone better. Now, listen, he had 4 fumbles again. That is just can't happen. It can't happen. Ball security is something that has to be taken more seriously, I think, and focused on a little bit more. The other thing is this too. One of the things that I thought that, I don't know if it was exactly in the red zone. It was right. I know it was inside the 25-yard line, but the pick that LaNorris Sellers threw, there could have been a flag on it again. I'll say it, but it's an inexcusable throw to make in that situation. And that's something you've got to have better production and focus on from your quarterback, just flat out. I thought you got the most that you could get probably out of Rocket Sanders. You look at the numbers, 19 carries, 143 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had a long of 66, outran everybody in the field on that one. Thought that was great. You had 3 different guys with at least 2 catches, which I thought was good. Jared Brown, 3 catches, 48 yards. Josh Simon this week instead of Michael Smith, where you were able to get the tight ends involved. I thought that was great. Nick Harbor, we had a Nick Harbor sighting, 2 catches for 18 yards. Was bummed that we didn't see more out of Juju McDowell. He didn't even register a single touch outside of special teams. So that was kind of frustrating. They gave 1 punt return for 12 yards, which is not bad. Then we also talk about the fact that, like you had 21 runs out of your quarterbacks. And a lot of that is also brought up because of the sacks, right? We talk about that. But that's not a recipe for success always, as you saw in the second half. Robbie having 11 carries for 11 yards is not ideal. And if he's probably going to play a significant amount against Akron because of the injury to LaNorris Sellers. It's going to be a high ankle sprain. My thought is they're probably going to rest him for that game, rest him for then the bye week, and then get ready for Ole Miss coming to town. But yeah, there's still a lot that could have gone better if you are South Carolina, and if you are talking about a situation where you wanted to leave that game and the field 3-0. Just flat out. It got to be better on defense. The missed tackle situation was bad. Caleb Durham, good running back, but that's a situation where LSU hasn't been able to run the football all year. That kid comes down, rips off 8.9 yards a carry, has 2 touchdowns, right? Still, it was a massive uphill battle for most of the game, it felt like, especially in the second half. When LaNorris went out, it felt like it was a ticking time bomb, man. It was tough to see. And it felt like it was falling apart. Now, I will say this, looking at some of the PFF grades and talking about who performed well, your top 3 performers were your receivers, Gage, Jared Brown, and Delvon Campbell. I don't think Delvon's the right way to say it. I think somebody has already corrected me on this, and I apologize. Your offensive line was not great. Mazio did not perform well. And this is PFF, but I think it's also like they do a pretty good job, at least on the interior, talking about the offensive line and defensive line, on where players graded out and how they played. It's also stuff that I'm just flat out not going to go back and watch tape on, just to be honest. Like, I'll talk to Cole Kubelik and we'll talk to PFF and look at some of their numbers. Kamar Bell, 61.7, fine. I mean, fine. Rashawn Lee, 59.1. Josiah Thompson, 57.1, was your fifth lowest graded offensive player in the game. You know, he was getting baptized SEC play, to be honest. He was going up against some grown-ass men. And they didn't always bring pressure on his side, but they did a good job of getting him in, on his heels a little bit at times and trying to confuse him as well, which is fine. He's a true freshman. It's his third game, right? It's his third game. So what are you going to do? Love to use Vandrevius Jacobs in the explosive plays that we thought maybe at this beginning of the season Nick Harbor was going to be securing. It's clearly been Vandrevius Jacobs through the first couple of games. He had one catch for 31 yards. Love to see that. Defensively, let's go back and look at defensively real quick as well. And then I want to talk about how this is going to impact in the big picture grand scheme of things. Defensively, Alex Huntley, your highest graded player. I thought that was great. TJ Sanders is great. Kyle Kennard, Gilbert Edmond, Nick Evenwari, these grades don't seem to, in my opinion, really show how good of a job they did. You're talking about, Kyle Kennard took 48 snaps in that game. He's on the field for a lot of that game. Dylan Stewart was on the field for 38 snaps. He was graded out of 65.6. Demetrius Knight. Here's what was mainly surprising to me, and that is this. Your lowest graded player, and you could kind of see this happen during the game, your lowest graded defensive player was Debo Williams. And I think that we all agree that Debo Williams is the heart and soul of that defense, him or Evenwari, right? But he was bad at times. There's just no other way to put it. He missed a lot of tackles. He like plays where it's like you could have had a 2-3 yard gain or even a stop for no gain and that somehow end up turning into a first down or 8 or 9 yards. So now it's second and short or third and short. That's the kind of stuff. And it seemed like it happened a handful of times, maybe slightly less than a handful of times. Just things you got to get better at. And then the other part of it too, I could be wrong about this. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But one of the worst plays that I saw from the entire game, this is something you just got to be better about. I think it was Kilgore that came off his man to commit a pass interference call. It's like on 3rd and long, and it was in the corner of the end zone. I think it was in front of the student section. Where he came off his man, and I thought it was a BS call at first, and they showed the replay. He definitely got there early and made direct contact with the receiver. Here's the thing. This is more about a situational awareness thing. It more than anything is he committed a foul on 3rd and long against Aaron Anderson, who's a 5'8", 5'9" guy. He's a small, shifty, slot guy. He has great speed, but they use him a lot in short games, screen passes, all that kind of stuff. You saw it multiple times. This is Aaron Anderson. Having him already guarded in one-on-one, and you see him make this heads-up play where he comes off his man because he sees the ball in the air. That's great that he got his head around. It's great that he was trying to put himself in a position to make a play. Love all that. And it seemed like it was also a weird, I don't know if it was a mess up on the route tree or from the offense or what. But there's no reason that 2 LSU receivers were in that close of vicinity. It was very odd to see that that far down the field. But love the fact that you got your head around. Love the fact that you came off to provide help and try to get an interception. He, within a half a second, makes direct contact with the receiver. It's a 15-yard penalty. You extend the drive. It's things like that you have to get better on, flat out. So we will also get better as well. I'm about to have some dinner. We got a big Monday Night Football game on as well. And we'll get into the last part of the show, talk about some positives. I promise they're coming, and also some miscellaneous news and notes, as you can tell from the SC in it, that are SC related. So stick with us. Locked On Gamecocks will be right back. All right, welcome back. As we get into our very last segment, I want to talk to you about our friends at FanDuel. and give them a quick shout out. You've heard us about FanDuel before. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Well, they have a little bit of something different for you now through September 22nd. So it's now through this Sunday, this upcoming Sunday. All FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game. All you need is a Google account and current form of payments, and you can cancel anytime. Just visit FanDuel.com, download America's #1 sportsbook today. All right. Close out the show with this. Now, there's a lot of positive takeaway from this game that happened. I think a lot of it comes from the quarterback play and his confidence. LaNorris Sellers, especially coming back from injury. I still say it's a game you probably win with him in there, which is probably not something we would have said after watching the first 2 games. I feel like Robbie Ashford, you could make the argument he could have won those first 2 games. I don't think that's the case, obviously, here after the LSU loss. So it's a lot of confidence for QB1 going into what I think will not necessarily be a game against Akron, but the game against Ole Miss in a couple weeks. Now, the other thing is this. You look at the latest projections for the bowl projections from 247 Sports and our buddy Brad Crawford, specifically noted South Carolina alum and fan. I believe he's an alum. Either way, so the South Carolina projected bowl that they would be going to after this week's performance. Now, again, this is a loss, right? But I think it speaks to how high the ceiling can actually be for this team. If they can continue to play like that, this is a 7-8 win team, like flat out. Listen, A&M is not great on the road. I know what they did in Florida. It's a really bad Florida team. We've talked about Mizzou. Mizzou is clearly beatable after we watched that game against Boston College. But his latest bowl projections has, for 247 Sports, has South Carolina playing in the Gator Bowl on January 2nd against Boston College. Now, January 2nd bowl game, that's a big deal. I believe it's January 2nd. It's a big deal, though, to be playing in that game. They'd be playing against Boston College in this projection. It would be the second time, I believe, in 3 years that South Carolina would be playing in that game. They played Notre Dame a couple years ago as well. But a big game and a big deal nonetheless. It's a lot to build off for a program getting a New Year's Day bowl going into next season. So that's a lot of positive upside. In some miscellaneous news and notes, one thing from a former South Carolina standout, obviously, Deebo Samuel. I almost said Deebo Williams. Deebo Samuel out for several weeks with a calf strain. He has been on obviously a tear since he's been in the NFL, but he has been, been good or bad for you on your fantasy team?
Bad. Okay,
well, apparently he's been bad on my girlfriend's fantasy team. That doesn't really mean much. Regardless, it's only going to miss a couple weeks. It's not that serious. San Francisco will now be without him and Christian McCaffrey, so it'll be interesting to see what that offense looks like. But either way, Deebo Samuel out for a few weeks. And then last but not least, the best news I think you're going to hear from this entire episode. How about A'ja Wilson? A'ja Wilson breaking the single-season scoring mark from the WNBA. She scored over 1,000 points. That's the first time it's ever happened in WNBA history. She breaks Jewel Lloyd's record from a season ago of 939 total points. She also did it in 100 fewer shot attempts and in 3 less games. 100 fewer shot attempts and still got to 1,000 points. Her season's been incredible, averaging 27.3 points per game, 11.9 rebounds per game, and I think 2.7 blocks per game as well. Just in a one-of-one, a unicorn of a player and talent at any sport, but she has obviously been really, really good this year in the WNBA. It's about time she gets some damn recognition because most of the talk continues to be about Caitlin Clark or I'm actually blanking on the name right now. Angel Reese. What am I thinking about? So it's good that A'ja Wilson finally got some long overdue, I think, pub that's much deserved. So fantastic job on her end. And I think they're about to hit the playoffs as well. Anyway, that is all for today's show. I hope you had a fantastic start to your week and a great Monday, like I always say, if that's even possible. But I appreciate all of you guys listening. Make sure you make your second listen one of the 2 following. Make it Locked on SEC with our buddy Chris Gordy. He does a phenomenal job there. Or check out Smothered and Covered, presented by Locked On from our good friend Barrett Sallee. Does a great job, formerly at CBS, and has worked and covered in the SEC since I was been in college. Great dude, good friend, and does a tremendous job with his show as well. So make sure you guys should check that out. And I hope you have a tremendous rest of your Monday, and we'll talk to you tomorrow on Locked On Gamecocks. See y'all then.